Black folks begging Marvel and DC for new characters in a golden age where black creatives are making their own characters and IPs. Sad. Just sad. Now available in paperback and e-readers, Spinsterella Goth Girl Summer. Take a trip into the macabre world of goth modeling in the new millennium in this spooktacular Spinsterella story. Pick up your copy of Spinsterella Goth Girl Summer in paperback and e-readers at Amazon.com and online booksellers everywhere. Now available on Lulu. John Haynes at Death's Door. The man who rules the world takes on the Greek god of death in this action-packed, all-new John Haynes comic book. Get your copy of the first John Haynes comic at lulu.com today. Better get the cool slower, y'all, cause we're having us a barbecue. I was on Twitter last month when I saw a tweet posted by a black comic fan that made me shake my head. Now, this tweet was by someone who was begging DC Comics to give us more black characters and was begging DC Comics because they were desperate to see more black characters in DC Comics and not looking at the overall landscape of the whole comic book marketplace and how that marketplace has completely changed. Now, this whole tweet was basically by one of these bootlicks who's out here looking to pander to DC Comics in the hopes that they will go out here and make new black characters. However, this individual really didn't see the reality as related to the whole changing marketplace of the comic book business and really showed how pathetic they were by going out here begging DC Comics to give them more black characters because we're in the middle of a golden age of black people who are creatives like myself making their own characters and their own comics and owning their own intellectual properties. And sadly, we got this dude out here begging a white-owned company like DC Comics for some scraps from the table when people are out here making their own meals and serving them at their own table. That was what was really sad about this tweet posted by this individual. Here you got people out here like Godhood Comics who responded to this tweet. Again, you got a brother out here got his own comic book company putting together his own high quality comics that feature black characters as the lead. And they got a dude out here sitting up here begging DC Comics to give them more black characters when I hate to tell it to dude, ain't nobody at DC Comics going to be able to make no more black characters because many of the black creatives have no interest in working for companies like Marvel or DC Comics anymore. Now, the reason why many black creators like myself have no more interest in working at comic book companies like Marvel and DC Comics is because we understand our worth as creators, and as we understand our worth as creators, we understand that our work has no value for a company like DC Comics because DC Comics these days and Marvel Comics, they basically treat their creators like the late Peter David very shabbily, and as they go out here and show no respect for those creators and leave them to wind up struggling as related to their health in their older age, we see that there's no real value of having our work being placed on a label of a Marvel or a DC because neither of those companies are going to compensate us as related to the worth of our labor and be able to pay us in a way that allows us to benefit from our intellectual properties and be able to make money off them. Because with the whole Marvel and DC Comics, they basically still are under a work for hire business model, and under the work for hire business model, you give the best years of your life to this comic book company. You create great characters for that comic book company, and what happens with that property is that property goes out here and makes millions and even billions of dollars, like in the case of Rob Liefeld as related to Deadpool, for these big companies like Disney, and you don't get a dime in any sort of compensation whatsoever. And no smart black creator like myself is going to go out here and put in work at a company like a Marvel or a DC Comics anymore to create any characters regardless of race, and definitely not going to go out here and create a black character to be work at these companies, because having a character be a part of a DC universe or a Marvel universe where they will be in the background of that universe, that's not something that's appealing to a black creator anymore, and not appealing to a black creator these days, because the whole marketplace has opened up thanks to technologies like print-on-demand technology that allows us to print an even 600-700 page book in less than a minute. I mean, creators now have more creative control over the entire process of comic creation, and many creators, again, aren't interested in looking to wait for years for companies like Marvel and DC to acknowledge their talent. No, brothers and sisters are out here taking their talent to the marketplace like I do here with the SJS Direct imprint. We have the confidence and the courage to go out here on our own, and that's what's ushered in this golden age of black creatives, going out here making our own comics, making our own science fiction and fantasy books, creating our own IPs, creating our own IPs that have value to us, and we'll go out here and build wealth for ourselves. We're out here spending our own money to invest in ourselves and not waiting for some white corporation to tell us that our properties have value. No, we understand our own worth. And what's really sad about this whole situation is you've got a dude out here sitting up here in the middle of this golden age of black creatives, sitting up here talking about, hey, DC, could you make some more black heroes? No, DC and Marvel can't even get nobody to make no heroes anymore. And they can't get nobody to make no heroes anymore because more people understand that you don't need to go to any of these corporations in order to gain an access to an audience. This is something I've known ever since about 2002, after years of submitting books to trade publishers like John Haynes and ISIS. I submitted those to trade publishers, and they had no interest in those books. So I went out here and started my own imprint after working with print-on-demand publishers in 2009, and started putting my own publications to the marketplace, because I understand that if you don't value your work, no one else will value it. And again, it's better for you to create and own your own intellectual property rather than beg a company like DC Comics or Marvel Comics to accept your characters, because they're, again, if you create characters, they own those characters, and you wind up with nothing at all. You wind up absolutely sitting up here broke, struggling, sadly, like the late Peter David did when his older age. I mean, it was sad to see how this man was treated. I mean, this man wrote one of the greatest runs of Incredible Hulk, went out here, redefined Aquaman and Supergirl, and wrote numerous books for Star Trek. And again, many of these corporations treated him like garbage, let this man wind up dying in debt, even though he generated millions of dollars in revenue. But what's even sadder than the way Peter David was treated was the way this black person on Twitter was, sitting up here again begging DC Comics to create more black characters, when that's not going to happen anymore, because many creatives ain't even thinking about Marvel or DC Comics anymore. No, that label no longer has any value whatsoever for many creators anymore. Many creators like myself ain't interested in working for Marvel or DC anymore. No, back in the 1990s, back in the early 2000s, yeah, having a DC publication and your name attached to it was a thing, but it's not a thing anymore. No, many people now see the value of their own intellectual property, and I was dare to say they even have a stronger sense of self-worth. And many black creators now say, hey, I'm going to go out here and make my own books. I'm going to go out here and tell my own stories. I'm going to go out here and share my work to the marketplace and let people go out here and discover it and see its value, and let people discover its value, because the internet is wide open. And we understand life is too short to be sitting up here begging a company like a Marvel or a DC Comics for some scraps from the master's table, when we could be out here making our own meals, creating our own recipe for success, and then preparing our own table and looking to compete by putting our best work out there without ever having to deal with all of the issues that you would have to deal with working with Marvel and DC. Because if you worked with Marvel and DC, as I have been told by some comic creators, what they're going to do is wind up tying up your hands as related to your work, and basically make it fit into their narratives. And the politics at these companies mean that your characters, especially if they are black, are not going to be elevated above a character like Superman or Batman. And what they will do is look to sabotage that character the way they did with the late great Dwayne McDuffie's Static. When the Static Shock show was on the air, many of those who I believe worked at Warner Brothers did not want to see Static Shock maintain its #1 status as related to being the #1 show from about 2001 to 2004, and we never got any sort of licensed merchandise. And that's because many of those at these companies didn't want to see a black character elevated to a high level of popularity on the level of Superman or Batman, or be that household name that shows that you can have an image of a black person be on the same level as a white character. These are the things that a black character would have to deal with as related to working at being a property at Warner Brothers or Disney. They wouldn't want to see a black character be elevated to that level, but out here in the independent market, that character can wind up going out here and becoming a popular character. They can wind up becoming a popular character and finding a following. That's what they can find as related to the marketplace, because the marketplace is open, and that's what can happen to a creator. They can go out here and build wealth as related to their own IPs and be the person that companies have to deal with. And that's something many blacks in fandom are afraid of, I believe. Some black folks are afraid of the idea that a black person would have that type of power to, one, be able to own IPs, two, be able to control the wealth as related to things like licensing and distribution, and three, have creative control over their message, and that message basically be one that could be one presented by a black person. This is what many of these guys who are bootlicks are afraid of. And again, they want to beg for the scraps from the master's table. Hey, Marvel, DC, go make us some characters. They ain't thinking about making you no characters, because their goal is to, again, try to get that audience of white comic fans and white fandom, keep them happy. Their interest ain't in you. And that's the thing that's really sad about this guy who dropped this tweet. His whole perception of comics is really sad and really pathetic, especially when you consider, again, we are in this golden age. I mean, when I was growing up as a kid, we didn't even have this at all. The most you had was Cyborg and Jim Rhodes, and maybe a couple of other characters like Black Vulcan on television. And when I got into my 20s, we had a couple of independent companies like Milestone. That was about it. But when I think about these 2020s, I mean, this is a golden age, because I'm able to buy independent comics from companies like Godhood Comics and many other black-owned comic companies that are out here, like Darkstorm Comics, that's run by Kevin Grievou, and many others. I mean, it's a golden age because you have all of these different books out here from independent black creators. I mean, there are great books out here by many great independent comic creators, brothers and sisters out here getting their work to the marketplace. This would never have happened during the 80s when I was growing up, because creating your own independent comic, that costs thousands of dollars. But these days, the costs have been reduced so low that anybody could get in the game. And I did even get in the game myself with my own comic, John Haynes at Death's Door, which is right now available on Lulu right now in paperback. I mean, as a guy who's out here who's made about 2 comics, and I would love to do the third one, which is I want to do is an ISIS graphic novel. Again, I understand that, again, we can make our own stuff, own our own stuff. We don't have to beg these companies for scraps anymore. We don't have to sit there and wait for somebody else to have one of these characters make an appearance, or make an appearance in a way that basically makes the character look bad, like with the recent Milestone 2.0 relaunch, which was just absolute garbage, made by Reginald Hudlin. And we don't have to settle for scraps and leftovers like the white Black Panther, again, we don't have to sit there and settle for somebody else's junk that is, again, somebody's idea of black. No, we can go out here and tell our own stories and show a richer picture and more diverse picture of black life. We can go out here and show that richer picture of black life that is not shown in most modern comic books. We can go out here and tell all sorts of unique stories, and I'm seeing brothers and sisters out here doing this. And it's really sad you got a whole bunch of folks out here still talking about, well, want me for DC to make some more heroes, I really want them to make some more heroes. I mean, why don't you make more? Nobody's going to make more heroes for you because no creator is going to sell themselves short like that anymore, waiting for them to give them a raw deal where, yeah, you get the work for DC, you get a DC bullet on your comic, but the whole thing is that comic ain't really reaching no one. Your message is basically being diluted by editorial, and your character's basically watered down. Yeah, they may be able to make an appearance with Superman or Batman, but they're a background character. But when you work on your own, your character is put to the forefront, like with my characters like Isis Esteem and John Haynes and Matilda Crowley. Those characters get to be seen front and center on my books. They get to be seen front and center by readers. They get to be the center focus of the story. And they're not in a story where they're sucking up to one of these white characters, seeking white validation and approval. No, they're seeking out to fulfill their own missions, being their own characters, being their own men and women, something brothers and sisters need to see that would help in developing people's self-esteem and self-worth and self-confidence. That's something that I really believe that you get when you read black comics that are created by independent black creators. You start to get a whole perception of self that completely changes, because that's what viewers tell me when they pick up my books and give them to kids. Now, I write basically fiction as related to prose, and I would love to do more comics, but what I see is that from what my viewers have told me, they gave my books to their kids and they were like, wow, their whole perception of self has changed, their self-esteem has changed, their whole view of the world has changed, where they start to see, not I'm a black person in a white world, but I see myself as a black person front and center. I see a world where I have value, I have worth, and that boosts a child's self-esteem. And it boosts a child's self-esteem, it boosts an adult self-esteem, because that's what I did growing up in the 80s. I watched shows like The Cosby Show and many other shows, movies like Hollywood Shuffle and House Party, and I bought Milestone books, and it changed my perception of self to say, I don't need to be in the background of somebody's world looking to lick somebody's boots. No, I can stand up and be my own person. That's the way I see things. And again, I understand that I have value, and again, and that's why I can appreciate this golden age that I'm in, where brothers and sisters are out here putting in that work and improving themselves and saying, hey, we're going to tell our own stories. We're going to make our own IPs. We're going to own those IPs and basically control those IPs and control the message of those IPs. This has more value than working for Marvel and DC. It has more value because you are the one owning that IP. You're the one controlling the message of that IP. You're controlling the role of that character and the image of that character, because image is something that's very important. When you have control over image, you control the way people can see themselves, and that's something I understand as a writer. That's something I understand as a guy who works with different comic artists. Again, I understand, controlling the black image is important for foundational black Americans, and controlling the way we see ourselves so that we can see our worth and value in society. That's what I understand as related to things. And again, understanding that when we go out here and tell our stories, again, we are the one controlling those stories. And when I look at this age, again, I can appreciate it for what it is. I mean, this era is a golden age for black creators. I mean, we're in an era where people, again, are taking control of our story, taking control of our narrative. We no longer need to be Luke Cage with a metal headband and a yellow shirt talking about ribs in a Power Man comic. We no longer need to be, again, a guy like Falcon who's the background character of somebody's sidekick. We no longer need to be the guy like Jim Rhodes, who is one of the better characters in comics. Again, we can be the lead center characters of our stories, control our narrative. Again, this is what this golden age means to me. And again, it really saddened me a month ago when I saw this dude begging DC for more black characters when there's a whole table of black characters out here on platforms like Kickstarter, out here, and guys putting in that work. And instead of him going out here and begging for scraps, he needs to see the table with all of this great content. Again, a whole smorgasbord of just a buffet of just absolutely great stuff. I mean, a complete buffet where you can pick and choose whatever you want to pick. And what's really sad is that this is what I call the spellbound mindset. Because in my novel, Spellbound, where you have this guy who wants to fit himself in a black box that's acceptable to white people, again, scavenging for crumbs, when there's a whole meal waiting for him at a buffet of great black content. And again, that guy can't see that because his whole mind is Marvel and DC, the big two. But the big two is not all comics. That's something I learned back when I was in junior high school in 1987 was, comics are more than Marvel and DC, and many of the next big properties, they're not going to come from Marvel and DC because nobody's going to sell themselves short and cash themselves out. No, people are going to go and look to make that wealth for themselves and get that payday. And the whole way many black fans, again, you can find those books is by going to independent creators. That's where the buffet of great content is right now. Because we're right in the middle of the golden age, and you can get in on the ground floor of much of that great content right now. Now, my first full comic, John Haynes at Death's Door, is available on Lulu.com in paperback right now. And you can get that comic for the same price as it was on the 2022 Kickstarter by clicking the link in the description box. And you can also pick up my first full comic, Esteem No Good Deed. That's on Kindle for just 99 cents. And you can also pick up that comic in the Esteem series book, Esteem Blast from the Past. And if you want to check out all the characters in the SJS Direct universe that I've mentioned, like Isis, John Haynes, Esteem, Matilda Crowley, and Lilith Graves, who was in the vampire novel Eternal Night, you can find all of those characters in the SJS Direct universe in the books of the Isis series, the Esteem series, the John Haynes series, the Spinsterella series, my vampire novel Eternal Night, or my novel A Recipe for Success, and other novels like The Temptation of John Haynes, The Man Who Rules the World, and The Thetas, and books like A Recipe for Success. All those books are available on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format, and you can also find them at other online booksellers like Draft Digital, Google Play, Barnes & Noble, and big box retailers like Walmart and Target. And if you'd like to see me make more videos talking about comics, science fiction, and fantasy, you can drop a donation to the Patreon, the PayPal, or the Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback and e-readers, Esteem Season of the Witch Girl. The aspiring angel takes on a wicked teenage witch in this action-packed, all-new Esteem series adventure. Pick up your copy of Esteem Season of the Witch Girl in paperback and e-readers at online booksellers today. Now available in paperback and e-readers, John Haynes, A Thorn in My Side. The man who rules the world takes on an agent from the CIA from the Black Bootlick in this all-new John Haynes series adventure. Get your copy of John Haynes' A Thorn in My Side in paperback and e-readers at online booksellers everywhere. Support Black-owned and Black-operated digital broadcast media. www.niceradionetwork.com. Nice Radio Network broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.